So everyone, this was a really hard decision for me, but Mitch has just been annoying me recently, so I decided to replace him.
And capture me.
Ignore whatever you just heard. That was not Mitch's voice. He is not tied up in the closet right now.
Help!
This is our roommate, Britt.
Hi, guys.
She's the bomb, and she is also, yes, a seeker, wanderer, whatever you'd like to call it. And she's going to be joining me today, not anyone else.
Dun, da, da, da. I got out!
He escaped. The great Houdini has arrived.
It wasn't magic. It's just because you don't understand.
Oh, yeah. Sure am. So yeah, before we start a video with anyone new, we like to say you are not expected to say anything or not to say anything. We just appreciate your presence. You can hit the space bar anytime you want to pause the video.
Space.
And I think those are all the rules.
Yeah, it's a pretty tough job
Yeah.
doing reactions. It requires a lot
Sometimes you need to hit the space bar
skill.
multiple times to get it to stop.
It gets crazy then, yeah. All right, you're trained. You're hired.
Sweet.
Today we're watching some Alan Watts because we haven't watched him in a while, and Britt's been on an Alan Watts train, so
Yep.
it's all about the nature of God today. Shall we?
I mean,
Here we
I
go.
don't know.
Now, I'm sure that most of you know the old story about the astronaut who went far out into space and was asked on his return whether he had been to heaven and seen God. And he said yes. And so they said to him, well, what about God? And he said, she...
Two things. First of all, it's Shiva. Second, every Alan Watts video feels very epic.
Yes.
Every time you get it's like epic picture or like nature scenery, music that like drops
Fades in
somehow
slowly.
drops in at the perfect times, and he's like, and then you realize, boom. There's nothing else, but I just wanted to appreciate the picture.
Yeah, that is the serpent's eyes. That's crazy.
Yeah.
was asked on his return whether he had been to heaven and seen God. And he said yes. And so they said to him, well, what about God? And he said, she is black. And although this is a very well-known and well-worn story, it is very profound. Because, I tell you, I knew a monk who started out in life as pretty much of an agnostic or an atheist. And then he began to read Henri Bergson, the French philosopher who proclaimed the vital force, the élan vital, and so on. And the more he read into this kind of philosophy, the more he saw that these people were really talking about God. And I've read a great deal of theological reasoning about the existence of God, and they all start out on this line. If you are intelligent and reasonable, you cannot be the product of a mechanical and meaningless universe. Figs do not grow on thistles. Grapes do not grow on thorns. And therefore, you, as an expression of the universe, as an aperture through which the universe is observing itself, cannot be a mere fluke.
That's one that's been getting me, is that Ram Dass always says that your existence is not a mistake. Nothing that could happen is a mistake, because his way of reasoning it is that there are people that he's witnessed that can say something that's going to happen in the future. So like next Tuesday, this is going to happen. And so how couldn't it be that like everything is in order up till that point? Because we all like have heard of the butterfly effect, where if like one little tiny thing changes, all of reality is different.
Yeah.
So all like on every level, if this is true, everything must be existing how it should, and by these certain laws to get to this other spot, if someone can tell the future. Because I always, when I was firmly rooted in belief, I always believed that there's no way that there could be a future, that there could be a higher plan, that it's just like everything's just continually being created and nothing, it's not going anywhere specific. Not that it necessarily is.
And someone being able to predict the future would negate that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it's funny, like, as I say that, it's almost as if I can now, like, marry those two together somehow.
That's always the interesting thing for me, because it's like, it does seem on a lot of levels like nature is just this, like, play of creation and, like, evolutionary process, flowering, whatever is happening. And then it also feels like there's something, I mean, I guess you could say that evolution on its own is always going to be perfect in its own sense, because all of the evolutionary things are like happening because of everything that happened before that the thing came into. So it's like, as long as you had a start, you know, everything's gonna follow. But it's just something you can't come to conclusions about, for sure. It's freaky.
Yeah. And the reason why I feel like I've been trying to not come to conclusions about things is because I feel like I have a certain amount of foresight now that my perception is always going to be subject to change. So it's like creating a conclusion about something is as if you think you know how it is, but how I thought I knew how it was 5 years ago is so different than what my perception is now. A year ago, 6 months ago, like anything. So how could you come to conclusions about something that you, like, without the, I don't know, the humility to understand that like, that's just your perception, and it's probably going to change. And if it doesn't change, that probably means that you're too rigid with it.
World peoples, as a tree brings forth fruit, then the universe itself, the energy which underlies it, what it's all about, the ground of being, as Paul Tillich called it, must be intelligent. Now, when you come to that conclusion, you must be very careful, because you may make an unwarranted jump. Namely, the jump to the conclusion that that intelligence, that marvelous designing power which produces all this, is the biblical God. Be careful. Because that God, contrary to his own commandments, is fashioned in the graven image of a paternal, authoritarian, beneficent tyrant of the ancient Near East. And
Nice.
Okay, also something came to my mind during that. Yeah, I feel like, especially in Christianity, there's this phrase, God-fearing. And it means that you love God and you trust in God and whatever. But the way of saying it is just so interesting. Like, it's like, yes, you must fear God. Like, he is to be feared. I guess not necessarily in the way that we think of fear, but still, it's kind of interesting that, like, I don't know, as he described the...
rather than
archetype
like
that we
a
think of God.
deep devotion to God or something. It's
Yeah.
like
It's
fear.
like, yeah.
But fear being like you should be devoted because of that, you know, because of this like infinite power of life that God can take and give.
Yes. I feel like that's a big thing is like is when like the issue of humans trying to put any sort of characteristics on God.
Yeah.
Especially if like also just the word God has been so like like I'm kind of like Osho with it. Like I kind of want to like stay away from certain words now because it's like I say God, you think this, you think this, you think this, and this is just something like what do we I really it struck me very, very profoundly the other day when I asked myself the question, do I ever feel like I've had an experience and then afterwards thought that was an experience with God? And the answer was no. I feel like there are no experiences that I've had that is like God comes down and shares this experience with me. I feel like I've had experiences like, say, of my own divinity or of the divinity around me, though I never have felt like any of the deepest experiences of my life were, like, I don't connect that at all with God.
Yeah.
Even though I've had this, like, underlying, deepening connection with my own version of that, I guess.
And like creation, all that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it definitely comes back to, of course, the definition of the word.
Definitely.
You know, and being like...
Yeah.
Because I think there are... I guess I recently have been looking at nature and like clearing the definition of God and replacing it with like the life force, kind of. So now when I like see an insect, like that's God to me.
What about non-life?
I consider that also life. But I don't consider anything non-life on this planet like that I've experienced. You know, like even a rock is like this part of this like rotating system that has given life to me or whatever. But it's just as much a part of that.
But do you feel like God only exists within the realms of the things that you would consider life?
I guess there's nothing in my experience that I've seen as not life recently. And kind of that's been like the clearing of like...
Interesting.
Like almost God being like the light that creates all of the worlds that you experience. Almost like the matrix behind it all, kind of.
I like that, the matrix behind it all. Yeah. It's why, for me, in some ways, our roommate, Jake, has this, like, thing. He talks about being in a simulation sometimes, and, like, that's just a big interest for him. And I feel like maybe we're just using different words to describe the same thing. Like, you say God as this matrix behind it all.
Yes.
Like, I oftentimes have been thinking of it lately as the laws underlying all reality.
Exactly.
And Jake is talking about simulation as like something that's running your life. He calls it like aliens. But what if we were all using this different language to describe something that's probably very similar?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like the essential difference in that, though, is that he believes, or at least what I know of, like, theories about simulation, is that there is some power that is controlling, like, some single entity that is controlling Earth and the universe and whatever, whereas, like, I feel like the way you think about it is more, there are laws to nature, but it's not like there's this one entity that's, like, maybe it is
I guess
more similar.
that's
than,
exactly what I'm saying,
You know
is
what?
that
As I describe it, it's like, you know what,
is that like
man?
the laws all converge into one law, and that's the single entity that they're calling a single entity, and I wouldn't even
And it's even an entity.
Exactly. Maybe
Yeah.
entity isn't even the right word. But we all don't really have the right words because words just can't get you there.
Yeah.
Well,
Let's hear more.
It's very easy to fall into that trap because it's all prepared, institutionalized in the Roman Catholic Church, in the synagogue, in the Protestant churches, all there ready for you to accept. And by the pressure of social consensus and so on, it is very natural to assume that when somebody uses the word God, it is that father figure which is intended. Because even Jesus used the analogy, the Father, for his experience of God. He had to. There was no other one available to him in his culture. But nowadays, we are in rebellion against the image of the authoritarian father.
That's it. I love that point about the fact that, like, an enlightened being, someone who's more tapped into truth, as we're all describing, needs to find a way to communicate with the people.
Yes.
Or else the teachings are never going to come across.
Right.
So it's like you automatically... And that just makes it so funny when you think about, a teaching that Jesus had then becoming, like, the norm for a teaching is like you've already killed it right there, because it's like that was a vehicle.
Lovely. Yeah.
But then you just held on to, like, an empty vehicle and tried
Not the thing. Yeah. Because Jesus, I imagine, was having these amazing, like, these experiences that are up here, and somehow you have to bring them down. Because that's how it is. It's like if you put it into language, you're bringing it down. And it's like even Jesus, his words can only point.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how powerful the being is. It's like their words, if you see them on a page, it can only point.
Sheesh.
Especially this should happen in the United States, where it happens that we are a republic and not a monarchy. And if you, as a loyal citizen of this country, think that a republic is the best form of government, you can hardly believe that the universe is a monarchy. But to reject the paternalistic image of God as an idol is not necessarily to be an atheist. Although I have advocated something called atheism in the name of God. That is to say, an experience, a contact, a relationship with God, that is to say, with the ground of your being, that does not have to be embodied or expressed in any specific image. Now, theologians on the whole don't like that idea, because I find in my discourse with them that they want to be a little bit hard-nosed about the nature of God. They want to say that God has indeed a very specific nature. Ethical monotheism means that the governing power of this universe has some extremely definite opinions and rules to which our minds and acts must be conformed. And if you don't watch out...
That's interesting, because I feel like there's a distinct difference between what Alan Watts is describing and what the whole, like, laws being. Because what he's describing is that this God figure wants things to be a certain way, so we should act a certain way. And I think what's interesting about when you hear about laws of karma or something like that, or we had a teacher named Sri M he just talked about, he basically said that the reason why some enlightened beings are able to produce miracles or why we would call them miracles are because they're just performing things. They know the laws underlying all of reality, and they know how to manipulate them. Or maybe not manipulate them, but they just like know how they exist, and so they do things that are really normal but seem like miracles to us because we don't understand them.
Just like if we didn't understand physics and then you were able to like fly a plane, someone would be like, that's magic.
Yeah.
But if you
yeah,
know
yeah.
physics, then it's not magic.
Exactly. So similar thing. But what's interesting when they say stuff like that is that that's not any sort of guidelines for you to live your life. It's like, no, this is all of the things that you could do. This is everything underlying your life. It doesn't have anything to do with what you should do, where you should go, like moral, anything. It's just, oh, this is how reality is constructed without anything more.
Well, just what you just said there, this is how reality is constructed. It just gets you back to the idea of like the matrix or the laws or whatever the thing is behind it all, and that people like yogis have been studying like that matrix
Yeah.
and trying to figure out like what the matrix is. You
Yes.
know, what are the actual baselines of things happening, and like what a crazy venture that
All
is.
yogis just took the red pill.
yeah. Everyone else is like, blue, please.
Please, I will remain in my comfortable life.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, that was crazy.
You'll go against the fundamental grain of the universe and be punished
Punished.
in some way. Old-fashionedly, you will burn in the fires of hell forever.
Yes.
More modern-fashionedly, you will fail to be an authentic person. It's another way of talking about it. But there is this feeling, you see, that there is authority behind the world, and it's not you. It's something else. Like we say, that's something else that's far out. And therefore, this Jewish, Christian, and indeed Muslim approach makes a lot of people feel rather strange, estranged from the root and ground of being. There are a lot of people who never grow up and are always in awe of an image of grandfather. Now, I'm a grandfather. I have 5 grandchildren, and so I'm no longer in awe of grandfathers. I know I'm just as stupid as my own grandfathers were, and therefore am not about to bow down to an image of God with a long white beard.
Oh, bang.
Now, naturally, of course, we intelligent people don't believe in that kind of a God, not really. I mean, we think that God is spirit, that God is very undefinable and infinite and all that kind of thing. But nevertheless, the images of God are have a far more powerful effect upon our emotions than our ideas.
That gave me a fun idea. What if you just took a blank piece of paper and you were like, draw God?
Whoa.
Like, what would you put?
Oh, I feel like, interestingly enough, everyone would have a different drawing.
Yeah.
Every single person.
But I feel like a lot of people would have the classic, like, old white dude with a white beard. Like...
I just love what he said there of like your image of God is much more powerful than like some floating ideas you have. Cause, or at least like at first, you know, unless those ideas are the thing given all your energy. But like an image can evoke so much inside of you. And of course an idea can too, but like the image evokes ideas so easily. Versus the other way around almost.
Yeah.
This image that's on the screen has been just consistently getting me all episode.
Yeah.
there's also something about this empty space where the eyes should be that is really getting me. It's like that's where freedom lies.
And that like the edges of the body are like like pixelating out into the nothingness.
Yes.
The universe in his palm. Its palm. Don't need to call it a him.
True. Does anyone know what Alan Watts is, or either of you know what Alan Watts is, what his history is? Like, how do you become this type of person? This type of... Because you don't just get this way by, like, growing up in the West. He must have traveled to, like, India or Japan or something. Does anyone know? I'm very curious.
Comment in the comments below.
Oh,
Bars.
yeah.
And while you're at it, like and subscribe.
Wow.
Hey,
Britt watches a lot of YouTube.
we're not doing any work right now. This is good.
Very nice.
And when people read the Bible and sing hymns, Ancient of Days, who sittest throned in glory, immortal, invisible, God only wise, in light inaccessible hid from our eyes, they still got that fellow up there with a beard on. It's way in the back of the emotions. And so we should think, first of all, in contrary imagery, and the contrary imagery is, she's black. Imagine instead of God the Father, God the Mother. And imagine that this is not a luminous being, blazing with light, but an unfathomable darkness, such as is portrayed in Hindu mythology by Kali, K-A-L-I, the Great Mother, who is represented in the most terrible imagery. Kali has a tongue hanging out long, drooling with blood. She has fanged teeth. She has a scimitar in one hand and a severed head in the other. And she is trampling on the body of her husband, who is Shiva. Shiva represents also, furthermore, the destructive aspect of the deity, wherein all things are dissolved so that they be reborn again. And here is this blood-sucking, terrible mother as the image of the supreme reality behind this universe. Imagine, it's the representative of the octopus, the spider, the awful awfuls, the creepy crawlies at the end of the line, which we're all terrified of. Now that's a very important image, because let us suppose, just for the sake of argument, that all of you sit...
Just before we get into whatever this let us suppose thing is, that approach of if you have a certain idea about something, take the very opposite to be true as a start, and then just see how differently you would perceive things. You know, that's been something I've been doing with stuff that I'm stubborn about. Be like, okay, so what if the opposite is the correct one, and my truth is just my narrow truth? What if this other potentially narrow, the truth that I've always called the narrow truth is actually the ultimate truth? And it's like it will really get your mind going, because you'll be like, you know, you'll first get like stay focused and be like, oh yeah, so then like this would be different, this would be different, this would be different. But then you'll always notice your like programs that you slowly built up over time coming back. It'll be like all of a sudden back defending your side, well inside of that side. And it just brings that stuff to the surface, which I think is a cool practice.
I'll share a quote that I saw from Manob's Instagram. Manob Doss is a lovely subscriber of ours. Yeah.
A hero.
A hero.
Some may call him.
It was a quote that really struck me yesterday when I saw it. Was a quote by Rumi. Does anyone know who Rumi is? Eli and I want to know who Rumi is.
I've heard a lot of really cool quotes that end with Rumi. No idea.
R-U-M-I. It's beyond the ideas of right and wrong, there is a field. I will meet you there.
Oh, I've heard that one. I love that one.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mm.
And that just, I feel like lines up with my experience of big things happened to me right when I was able to say one side, say the other side, walk away. Like, this is true. Sure. Whatever. Like, fine.
Even though they're conflicting.
Even though they're so conflicting, they're like contradictory. Yeah.
It also reminds me of Nietzsche and his whole God is dead thing, where it's like, all right, once we don't have these like 10 commandments or whatever, these like rules to guide us, we look for morality in other areas like science, and it's like science can't give you that, like what you were talking about earlier, like
or if science does, you need to recognize that science is set up on a whole bunch of beliefs that you've already said are this is true even though you don't know. Just like with God,
and it can be
you
biased,
said
like,
it's crazy.
Yeah.
But then the image, this is so cool, making an image of God that is purposefully destroying your ideas about God.
Yeah.
Like that God is some brutal creature.
Yes.
But then you're like, that's God. And you have to just take that.
Yeah, because how much is the imagery around God like this lovely seeming being in a lovely seeming place?
Or even something like this. It's like some all-powerful being that's like looks freaking cool. You're like, oh, if I could be that, I'd be that.
Yeah.
Literally just create a universe right here.
All right. Yeah. I mean, fine. That's cool.
But then the fact that Shiva gets trampled on because like that looks a lot like a Shiva.
Yeah.
But then that in these depictions, Kali is just trampling Shiva.
Yeah.
It's just like that is that freedom to not take the imagery too seriously.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
And with that, the ideas.
Hinduism. It's a cool one.
Yeah, whoever came up with that.
Whoever came up with that is pretty cool. Yeah.